Big 12 going to get 2 teams in the playoff this year? I would say last year the Big 12 came arguably closer to getting 0 teams in the playoff than 2. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's fair. I do think that was the reality. And that has to change this year, right? I certainly think it does. And I'm going to tell you why for a bunch of reasons here. Outside of just the obvious, you want more teams in the playoff than not, more money for the league, yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of reason to say that it matters quite a bit. And it really is easy to forget how well Arizona State performed in the college football playoff as we get further away from it and more of this conversation centers around the future of the playoff. And the Big 12 just doesn't seem to have a whole lot of respect in this national conversation. Even though it was reported that Brett Yormark started the 5+11, the only conversation there has been about slamming the Big 12 for potentially locking itself out of getting more teams into the playoff without acknowledging how gutsy, how principled of a stance it is. And the real reason that it's being done, you're not getting much respect at all for the Big 12 here and how they're operating. And oh, by the way, again, if you could, it's like Cher, if I could turn back time, if you could just turn back time and get a 4th and 13 freaking stop from Arizona State to have won the Peach Bowl against Texas this year in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. I mean, these conversations could be a lot different. Like one play really changes narratives. And the same thing can be said for that Houston basketball game, right? If you just get to go back and change 2 plays, you can have a national championship at hoops this year and then a college football playoff win over Texas. Maybe these combos would be different. But there's not a lot of talk about that. And in fact, I would argue the ACC got more juice from sending 2 teams to the playoff and performing objectively worse, one against the exact same team that Arizona State played. They got more juice out of that than the Big 12 actually got out of damn near winning a game and performing very well. Instead, you had to deal with half the season last year, the Big 12 fighting this narrative battle of it was Boise for a lot of it because it seemed like at one point in time there it was that was the battle for the bye, right? It was going to be until the ACC fell out because of the way things broke at the end of the year. And with the championship game, it was who's going to get that 4th bye. And it was, well, Boise is better. And it turned into this debate that, frankly, I kind of hate. It's one that the SEC and Big Ten love because they're causing all these problems and they just get to watch the minions fight amongst each other. And so they got to watch Big 12 fans and Boise fans duke it out, which we didn't need any of that. But you see why it happened, because there was a threat there that the Big 12 wouldn't get a bye. And Boise did wind up with the 3 seed as opposed to Arizona State at the 4 seed. Then you entered a couple weeks where you're having to even defend the Big 12's honor against freaking Tulane and Army. No offense to those 2, but they had come into the picture as oh, wow, could they actually be the 5th highest ranked conference champ and keep the Big 12 champ out of this thing? That's what you spent a lot of last season doing instead of, hey man, maybe Arizona State's actually pretty good. Maybe Arizona State is going to put together the best performance out of anybody not from the Big Ten, SEC, or Notre Dame in the college football playoff. There was no conversation about that, and there's not much conversation about it now that we are that far removed from it. So this is all part of why I think it's very important this year for the Big 12 to get multiple teams in. And I feel like I heard Josh Pate, my guy, I heard him say on his latest show, he gets really mad when people misquote him. So let me state, I believe his belief was that the Big 12 had a decent chance at getting multiple teams in this year. Okay. That is my perception, that people out there feel there is a better chance of that this year than last year. Now, remember last year at this time, a lot of the buzz was about Utah, K-State, Oklahoma State, really at the top of the league, who were 3 pretty known brands, known commodities, somewhat trusted commodities, even by college football elitists out there, and trusted commodities, at least relative to the rest of the Big 12. Okay. I'll say it that way, relative to the rest of the Big 12. So can the league, even if it is, just get 2 teams in, have them both lose, although it'll be a little bit different this year. You'll be playing first-round games. I guess you could argue in a way that's easier, possibly an easier opponent, but you will be on the road. So maybe I'll just keep that statement there the same. ACC had to play 2 road games. At least it was a neutral site game for Arizona State. You get 2 teams in playing road games, even if you lose them. It seemed like the ACC really benefited from having multiple selections. Couple of points here. The ACC also had a third team. It is fair to mention they had a third team that was close. Miami was very, very close. And then Clemson and Miami, 2 of the 3 teams involved here, were very high-profile brands. So that obviously makes a difference too. They are brands that are just going to draw more attention. They are in the ACC. They consistently recruit at a really, really high clip, which is going to keep them in more of those conversations. So that is a piece of it too. But the Big 12 can still really help itself, really, really help itself if they get 2 teams in. So how is that going to happen this year? How would that happen this year? For starters, we can't do this. When I say we, the Big 12 cannot do this. Flip the standings upside down, flip the Big 12 preseason poll upside down, and have that be the order of finish at the end of the year. Cannot have that happen because that was a massive problem for the Big 12 last year. I just said you had these trusted brands in Utah, Oklahoma State, K-State. They did not perform the way that they were expected to, and now all of a sudden, it was kind of like instead of getting Lucky Charms and Fruit Loops, you're getting the stuff on the bottom shelf that it's the generic stuff with a weird name. Like people didn't trust it quite as much. Like, what is this? Could it possibly be as good? Even if they are as good or better, sometimes you find a generic thing at the grocery store that's actually better. And that was Arizona State last year. It was actually probably better than you would have expected Utah, K-State, or Oklahoma State to have been at the beginning of the year. But people didn't trust it. Nobody trusted it because it's the, Maltos instead of Fruit Loops or whatever at the bottom shelf. And they're not in the bright, shiny box that you're used to from Kellogg's. So the Big 12 needs to have some established brands here, or at least teams that are perceived to be good going into the season. And that's why, I will start with Arizona State here if we're going to talk about teams that would need to be involved here. Like Arizona State, I think, is number 1 here. And fair to say number 1 with a bullet, seeing as last year they were an afterthought. Last in the league, nobody thinking about them, nobody thinking about their program. How could they make up that much ground in 1 year? Well, as I mentioned, you saw what they did last season. They then kept the coaching staff intact. They kept the high-profile players. Yes, they lose Scadaboo to the draft, but they keep the high-profile players on the rest of the roster. They keep Sam Levitt away from Oregon. They have a young, charismatic coach that everybody really likes, just creating a lot of buzz. There has been a lot of equity and buzz built up at Arizona State over the last year, and that is extremely valuable. Nobody is going to be surprised if Arizona State is a team at the end of the year that looks like they're going to win the Big 12 and be in contention for a playoff spot here, or, perhaps get the automatic bid. Nobody will be surprised. I mean, I've seen them as high as like 12 or 13 in some preseason top 15s. So they have the juice. Arizona State has the juice, even though there was literally none at this time last year. I would still say Utah is definitely in this conversation as a team that has so much residual brand value. From what they did go into a couple of Rose Bowls, winning the Pac-12, 2 of the last 3 years that they were there, right? The back-to-back seasons. And that still carries people know Kyle Whittingham. They know he's a Hall of Fame head coach. People know about the quarterback injury stuff. Utah, not only those 2 appearances at the end there, but they, Whittingham winning basically 9 games every single year for the better part of 2 decades leading up to the conclusion of their time in the Pac-12. There's a lot of brand value built up in the Utes. So I think they would still count here, even if, when the Big 12 preseason poll comes out, it'll be very interesting to see where they wind up. I would think they may be more like 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that range. But I think they're still high enough and still have enough behind them that would be fine. Baylor or TCU, I think Baylor especially probably is going to be like top 4, top 5 in the preseason poll. And they're a little under the radar in terms of what this team is because they surged at the back half of last year after everyone had really written them off and everyone saw the Hail Mary in Boulder. And it looked like at that point, Dave Aranda was going to be fired. There was the victory cigar thing after the game where he talked about how that was the formation they used that got burned on the Hail Mary. And everybody's like, oh, man, this guy's cooked. And so no one really paid attention to the improvement that they made, the emergence of Sawyer Robertson. But I think enough people who really pay attention to college football do know. And Baylor has been very successful at a high level within the last, 10 years with multiple coaches. So I think Baylor's still got enough. TCU, yes, the Georgia game hurts, but I mean, they won a playoff game in the 4-team playoff era, right? I mean, that should garner them a lot of respect there. They have the highest talent composite in the Big 12. I'll include K-State in this group. I just mentioned Athlon had K-State at number 13 in the country. A lot of people really do like Chris Kleiman's program, which has won 9+ games in 3 straight seasons, including a Big 12 title. So they've been consistently competing for a Big 12 championship. I think there's a belief there, especially with a player of Avery Johnson's talent level. I'll say that instead of caliber necessarily right now, but his talent level, people see the upside. This one's not really fair, but I would put Colorado in the group of like teams that, they can be involved here. Like Colorado can be involved here. They have probably not really earned that necessarily, especially replacing this year the star power that they are, but they're still a draw. Dion is still a draw. Caden Salter is a high-profile name at quarterback, or Julian Lewis. I mean, that's an even bigger name in terms of just name value if he's going to be the guy that actually wins the starting job. Colorado's still a lightning rod enough of one that I think they would really get benefit of the doubt. If they're going to win the league or be in contention for an at-large spot, they would have some real juice there. Interesting ones to me on how much these would really fit in. BYU, interesting case as to whether or not they would qualify as like teams established enough or highly thought of enough to get serious at-large consideration. BYU did not. It was a total crock last year that they did not get enough respect there and wind up finishing 17th in the final college football playoff poll. That was ridiculous. They were in the national spotlight last year for as deep into the season as they went unbeaten. But how does that translate now to this year? Do people really respect that, or is it going to be more the narrative last year of like, this team's really not that good, just wait for them to lose? We're just waiting for them to lose. The clock will strike midnight at some point here. The other problem that BYU has is, will Jake Retzloff play? And not purely from a, hey, obviously he's going to help you win games standpoint, but from a, if Jake Retzloff is not playing, that probably hurts the perception of what BYU is. Like, people will be like, well, this is a backup quarterback. If a backup quarterback is running through the Big 12 here, and we already thought BYU wasn't good last year with the guy Retzloff that they thought was better than whoever this is playing, how can this team really be that good? You might be fighting a little bit of that. We shall see. Iowa State. Iowa State should get the respect. They've played in a couple of Big 12 championship games now since the pandemic, right? That was the 2020 season. Since the pandemic, they've been in a couple of Big 12 championship games. I think Matt Campbell is pretty widely respected. They've had some very good teams. 2 very good teams, and then a couple solid teams and 1 bad team in that time span. But I can't get the Paul Feinbaum clip stuck out of my head like unstuck. It's on a loop where he was just like, it was 2021, I believe, when Iowa State really didn't live up to the hype. They had Brock Purdy and Breece Hall, Charlie Kolar, like that whole team coming back, and they only went 7-6. And I can remember early in the year, Paul Feinbaum going on a rant about like, I will never trust Iowa State again because they burned me here when you all were trying to tell me this was a good team. I wonder if there are some that are a little more along those lines. Iowa State's probably fine, but we'll see. To me, there's still like a weird thing with their national perception, and I'm not saying it is correct or right, and maybe I'm focusing too much on Paul Feinbaum and whatever his influence would be. But that's kind of the list, like teams that I think would be no problem if they're the ones up there in the conversation at the end of the year, and then teams that are kind of borderline, and the rest, that's where I think you would really start to have some trouble in terms of what the perception would be, and you could run into a situation like last year. You definitely could.